Hi, I'm Pamela, and welcome to Greenstick Cottage, where I read and listen to books whenever the cats allow me to. Since my last BookTube video, I have finished 4 books, well, 3 books and 1 books adjacent podcast. And so I will start with the first one I finished, which was a rather short book called The Other Colonization of America. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce the author's name because I would end up butchering it. But I did pull up, it was kind of hard for me to follow this book because I don't know Spanish history virtually hardly at all. So I think it would have been much better to read a book of Spanish history first and then read this, or if you're already familiar with Spanish history. But apparently, so basically, to sum it up, at the end he has a chapter on conclusions, and there are 33 of these conclusions. I'll just read the 33rd one, which is kind of a summation of what the book's about. The history of the colonization of America has been manipulated, but not in a subtle or punctual way, but using all imaginable instruments, such as identity theft, documentary invention, and large-scale falsification, from the events themselves to their chronicles and their protagonists. If the maps report what they really represent, it means that no supposedly contemporary book of the events that are narrated is honest, and most likely they are books with false dates written after the 18th century. And he earlier states that in these conclusions that the official history has almost nothing to do with the information given by the maps. The Catalans and the Ottomans were protagonists of the first stage of the colonization of America. Castile has little presence in the world compared to the Portuguese, Catalans, and Ottomans before the 17th century. So that's kind of where this book is coming from. So that gives you some idea. I found this book on chronologia.org on the first page, and I thought, but where this book really shines is in the maps. So hopefully I can get, the cover of the book up here, and I just picked one of the maps because it shows California as an island, and it is a map from 1706. And I think it's in, I can't remember which, all right, I don't have it, but I can't remember which museum it's in. Maybe I can insert that as well when I show the map. And because I did take a screenshot of it. And anyway, I love the maps, and they're just beautiful. And if I knew more of what he was talking about, I'm sure they would be very informative because of showing the sigils and the flags and the crests and things on the maps that show at least who the map maker saw as the powers in those areas, in those geographical areas. So I'll leave The Other Colonization of America there. And the next book I finished was Cupid's Poisoned Arrow. And I've kind of talked about this a little bit as I was reading it. But at the end, in the About the Author section, was one of the best explanations of what the book's about. She said, or the About the Author paragraph says that, talks about the unwelcome effects of evolutionary biology on intimate relationships and the striking parallels between recent scientific discoveries and and traditional sacred sex texts. So basically that's what it's about, is that our biology wants to reproduce, our genes want to reproduce, and the best way to do that in a mammal way is, the mating occurs, and then you distance from that mate and find what she refers to as a novel mate, a new mate, to get those genes reproduced as many times as possible. And so the method that the author describes, as Marnia Robinson is the author, is about bonding, pair bonding, intimacy, and a physical relationship based on that, instead of on what she calls the passion cycle, because the passion cycle is that when there is, I'll just say climactic relationship, there's 2 weeks of distancing and aversion to the partner. And so a lot of relationships, her assertion is that a lot of relationships are destroyed by this, because you lose, and as it goes on, it just never, if you're repeating the behavior, you're constantly in this distancing phase, this cycle, and so you never can get to true intimacy. So I thought it was pretty challenging, and trying to understand it all. And she does intersperse between chapters the ancient texts about this, and showing how they line up with the new science, the new scientific discoveries about this, and that distancing behavior and looking for a novel partner, I think, is called the Coolidge effect. So you can probably look that up. And next was the Books Adjacent podcast called Murder Book. I finished season 2. I haven't seen any subsequent seasons on Audible. This is a podcast available on Audible, a true crime podcast. And it is hosted by Michael Connelly, who is the author of the Harry Bosch crime novels, crime fiction novels, as well as others, like The Lincoln Lawyer. And so I've really liked his writings so far. I'm reading his books in publication order, and I can't remember which the number that I'm on, but it was published in 2000. I'll get to that one in a minute. But anyway, this season 2, the title of this season of Murder Book was The Women Who Stopped Sam Little. Sam Little is a serial killer, and so this covers his case. And I think there's 14 episodes plus a two-part roundtable discussion afterwards. And this one suffered from, it did not have the solitary agenda of telling the story of this serial killer, his crimes and his capture, and all of that. It was distracted by its primary agenda, which was focusing on the women who stopped Sam Little. But the case itself is, features men who stopped Sam Little as well. So it was not it was not solely women who stopped this killer. So it's misleading in the first place, and then it just tries so hard to make this some kind of feminist triumph, and it just really distracted, I thought, from the main issue, which was getting this, very prolific serial killer stopped. So that was kind of annoying. So by the end, I was glad it was over. So that one, anyway, I would not. I probably, even if there was a season 3 available, I probably wouldn't go on. Okay, and then the last that I finished is Juvenile by Jane Austen. This was a feature for Jane Austen July on Katie's channel, Books and Things. She listed she put links in for each one of the stories included in Jane Austen's Juvenile, her early writings. And it was kind of a mixed bag, but a lot of it, it's not something I'll ever read again, let's put it that way. I'm glad I read it for completeness of reading all of Jane Austen's works, but I found them to be mostly silly and kind of, I just wasn't impressed. I mean, I guess depending on what her age was at the time, I mean, she obviously writes, she's very articulate and, what we would consider mature for her, whatever her, young age was, adolescence, I'm guessing, at the time. But the ideas were kind of just went off the rails sometimes, and I wasn't. Anyway, like I said, I'm glad I completed this for my Jane Austen enjoyment. But I wasn't real thrilled with it. And on my brain stack, the only thing I got to was my 5-in-1 logic puzzle, where I'm on the final one, where the 4 other puzzles results are material to the big grand finale here. And these are laid out with groups of clues, and so I've only gone through this first number 1 and started in on the solving here, but it's slow going. I'm not by the time I get to this, I'm so tired. During the day, I get tired, and then my brain doesn't work as well as it does earlier. And the other Jane Austen July work that I'm going through is called The Life and Works of Jane Austen by Devoney Looser, this is part of the Great Courses series on Audible. And I am, 54% through those lessons, because it's like you're taking a college course on Jane Austen and her works, and so it's very interesting from that point of view. I like hearing the analyses of the different novels and writings. She did talk about Juvenile, and so and also just the one of the recent chapters I listened to, this is a listen, was about the aristocracy, the differences between royalty, aristocracy, gentry, and things like that, and things like about courtesy and manners and things, and how all these classes worked together. I found that really interesting, and the difference between landed gentry and regular non-landed gentry, and so some of that knowledge, some of that was educational for me, because I didn't already know all of that. So I found that really interesting, and a baronet versus a baron, and so I might, I'm just a little over halfway, so I might. This has been a good experience, actually. Reading. Or listening to this Great Courses series on Jane Austen. I might look into those Great Courses some more on other subjects, because this one was, has been very satisfying. So I might go into more of those Great Courses. So next is Void Moon, which is by Michael Connelly, the author of the Harry Bosch series and Lincoln Lawyer. This does not feature either one of them, and it was published in 2000. And I'm going in publication order on his novels. This one I'm up to 81%, so I'm getting closer to the end. It compared to the others, it's disappointing. I would probably, it's kind of fair to middling, I guess I would call it. Instead of being law enforcement or good guy against bad guy, or law enforcement against criminal, this is actually criminal against criminal. And maybe Connolly wanted to explore the other side, or maybe he wanted to do something different. I can understand that, but the only people I like are the innocent people that get caught in the crossfire. And so it's, the main characters are not likable to me or sympathetic. And so I guess I'm trying to do completeness, because I'm trying to do all of Connolly's books until I just can't go on. If it gets so bad, I just can't go on anymore. It didn't really get that bad. It's still very well written. The mysteries, the mystery parts are good. It's just, like, I enjoy Harry Bosch as a character, and I don't enjoy the main character in this book. So we'll see how it goes. And I can't remember what the next book in the series is, but I'm hoping it'll be an improvement over this one. So. And then I'm still reading the Encyclopedia of Lost and Rejected Scriptures. I'm 68% into that. It's huge. I'm in the Apocrypha on Second Esdras, Esdras, and it pretty much parallels, the biblical narrative of this time period, which was after the return from Babylon. And I'm also reading the first section of History, Fiction or Science by Anatoly Fomenko, Volume 2. I have that in PDF in English, and I've made it up to, this section is comparing the parallels between the Second Roman Empire and the Third Roman Empire, as he calls them. And so it's going, ruler by ruler, or reign, whoever is in charge, and how they parallel each other. So I just finished reading about Hadrian from the Second Roman Empire. I can't remember, what is he, 100 something BC or something, 100 something BC. And Honorius is more like in the third. I didn't write down the dates, but anyway, how much their persons and their reign parallel each other. And he makes by the time you read about, I think I'm up to like the 27th pair of rulers. And by the time you've read that many coincidences in the lengths of their reigns, the wars that took place, how they died, how, any plots that were against them, things like this, it's pretty overwhelming how many, similarities or outright matches there are. So it's very compelling and interesting to read about. And I'm still reading The South Was Right. I'm up to 88% on that one. And it is, it's quite amazing. Some of the, it can be a very sad read at times because of all the bloodshed, atrocities, just the horrors of war, and especially, basically a brother war. And it's it can be overwhelmingly sad. But I found some quotes that I thought, I'm finally learning to highlight in my Kindle so I can remember these things. It's like, sometimes I read it and I'm like, oh wow, that's great. And then I forget to highlight it or write it down in my commonplace book. But this time, this was a chapter called The Equality of Opportunity. And I don't know if this was added in this revised edition, revised for the 21st century, or if this was in the original 1994, I think was even that one I think was a later release from the original, but whatever. This is from Gandhi, and I thought this was. I went to the wrong one. Just a minute. Hold, please. How do I say this is it? I'm still learning how to use these features on Kindle, so please be patient. And now it's telling me there's no popular highlights available when I just had them. Okay, let's try this again, and maybe I'll just find them manually. But I thought these were really good. Another thing they talked about in here, the authors, was maybe some of the conflict between the North and the South. The North was primarily populated by Anglo-Saxons, and the South more by Celts, Scottish, Irish, and so maybe some of the conflicts from Europe carried over into America. I thought that was an interesting observation. Okay, so here is Mahatma Gandhi. This is his quote. "For administration to be efficient, it must be in the hands of the fittest. There should certainly be no favoritism. If we want 5 engineers, we must not take one from each community, but we must take the fittest 5, even if they were all Mussulmans or all Parsis. Those who aspire to occupy responsible posts in the government of the country can only do so if they pass the required test." So Gandhi believed in equality of opportunity, but not equality of outcome. So I thought that was interesting. This is John C. Calhoun. I thought this was one of the best illustrations of this principle, I guess you would say. John C. Calhoun, he said, "But to go further and make equality of condition essential to liberty would be to destroy both liberty and progress. It is indeed this inequality of condition between the front and rear ranks in the march of progress which gives so strong an impulse to the former to maintain their position, and to the latter to press forward into their files. This gives to progress its greatest impulse. To force the front rank back to the rear, or attempt to push forward the rear into line with the front, by the interposition of the government, would put an end to the impulse and effectually would put an end to the impulse and effectually arrest the march of progress." I thought that was a really good illustration of soldiers marching in ranks, and how if you're pushing the front to the rear and the rear to the front, you're making no progress. And I thought that was really, that just really helped me visualize the problem with the whole idea that everybody has to, and that's a Marxist idea, that everybody is the same, everybody is paid the same, all of that. And they talk about that in there at the breakup of the Soviet Union, how even though people liked having the freedom, they didn't like other people getting rich, when that everybody should be paid the same. Some of the citizens that they liked some of the freedom, but they still liked the communist idea of everybody getting paid the same. So, all right, I think that was it on those. And my sunset reading time has really been suffering because it's too hot. It's just too hot. It used to be I would go outside on the deck to read just before sunset, and it was the cool of the evening. There is no cool in the evening anymore, and so I've been ditching sunset reading time. I have not been reading, and so the books that on my devices that I took outside to read on, I have not made a whole lot of progress because of that. Same thing with my nightstand reading is I'm staying up too late, and by the time I start reading, I start falling asleep quickly. So my first nightstand book is this one, History, Fiction, or Science, Volume 1. And this is due back at the library this week. And I haven't even made it to chapter 1 yet. I'm still reading, granted there's a lot of forewords and prefaces, and I'm only one page away from chapter 1. But I can barely, when I'm too sleepy, I can barely get through 4 columns like this. And so it's, so I think what I'm going to do, chances are I'm going to be able to renew this. I think you can renew twice before they won't let you anymore at the library. So I will probably take both of those renewals if I can get them, as long as nobody else requests the book. And then I'm going to have to find a different way, like either reading it on the website, chronologia.org, reading it directly from the website, or trying to convert it to PDF, and because it is available, but it's kind of laborious to get it in English. So we'll see how well I do on that. But I do enjoy reading it, and I did really enjoy the forewords and prefaces that tell the history of how they got started researching all of this, the timeline of accepted history and the mathematical problems with that, and all these parallels that they found where it's kind of like Middle Age, kingdoms of the Middle Ages just got, recast into the ancient past as Roman or Greek or whatever, and it's pretty extreme if you've never heard of it. But it kind of reminds me of what my grandmother used to say. Don't believe anything you hear and only half of what you see. And so I think it went something like that you just, we have inherited, the Bible even talks about how we've inherited lies. So, I don't know that Fomenko's theories are correct, but he isn't the first to challenge the accepted timeline. So it's also interesting learning about men like Morozov and Isaac Newton and their challenges to the timeline, especially Isaac Newton, because he was so close to the time that Fomenko believes that the whole thing got invented, essentially by Scaliger and his supposed protege Petavius, and that might be a phantom as well. So it's just, anyway, I just love learning. It's as good as reading sci-fi or fantasy, but it's more real. So I really like it. And so, oh yeah, and I'm still reading Saint with the fantastic book cover. And this book is followed by Fable. But I am only, what am I on Saint? 61%. So I've still got a ways to go, because I'm generally falling asleep during history, fiction, or science. So I haven't made much progress on Saint, but I do like it, and it's it's ramping up, and it's a good fantasy. And then I'm only 74% on my beginner's guide to the doll's house hobby. But I'm learning a lot about varnishes and wallpapers and flooring and everything for doll houses, and I find it very interesting, even though I just didn't know it was that there was just so much to it. And so I love looking at miniatures, but anyway, so I'll be going on to something else when I finish that. And so I have a couple of planned starts for hopefully in August. I'll get to start them. I think I'm going to try to get Alaska started like tonight, if I can go to bed early. I don't know. I'm so curious. What sparked my interest in reading this was Erion at Bookzelots. She had this on her TBR, possible TBR for August. And I saw the book cover and I'm like, I have that one, somewhere. If I can find it, I'll read it too. And I haven't read James Michener since probably the 80s. And I read Covenant and Texas and loved them. And so I've been collecting, when I go to book sales or whatever, I've been collecting Michener novels and historical novels, and I have quite a few now. And I'm kind of like, then I started thinking, well, it's been like 30 years at least, 35 years, something like that, since I've read these. Gosh, it might be even 40 years. I can't remember. But well, I even like his writing. I don't know, so I'm kind of anxious to try and see. And I Alaska is like the final frontier, so it's exciting to read about Alaska anyway. My former neighbor, he came from Alaska, and I heard a lot of his Alaska stories, and so I'm kind of fascinated by Alaska. So I hope it's good. I hope it's as good as I remember Texas being, for example. So yeah, so I'm going to definitely try to get this. I don't know if I'll finish it in August, but I definitely want to get it started. And the other two books that I've okay, I got to calm down. I'm kind of excited. So again, I learned of this book from Erion at Bookzelots, and it's called Those Damned Rebels by Michael Pearson. And so I put it on my want to read list because it is the American Revolution through the eyes of the British, I think is what it's called. And so it would be a great thing to read when I finish The South Was Right, because it's kind of the same thing. You're reading the other side of the story. And so I was really wanting to find this book because I checked the library right away. They don't have it. And then I checked the used booksellers online. And, the cheapest I could find was $20 for this book. And I was like, yeah, it's pretty steep. I've got so many books I need to read. I don't think I should buy another book, or blah, blah, blah. And then one day I was thinking about it, talking about it, and I thought, well, how much is it, if it's $20 used, how much is it brand new at Amazon? And would I be willing to, fork it over? So I look on Amazon, and they've got the Kindle version marked down to $2.99. So I immediately snapped it right up. And so it's waiting to be started. But I'd like to finish The South Was Right first. So hopefully I'll get started on that. And another one that Erion, I guess we like a lot of the same books or have similar interests, and our interests overlap enough. And she was talking, she had finished reading Evelina by Frances Burney, and I was like, I don't think I'd ever heard of it, maybe, but I did not know that Frances Burney was an influence on Jane Austen. But Erion's description of the book, I was like, oh, I want to read that. And so I found it on Audible, so I'm going to be listening to it when I finish the life and works of Jane Austen. I think it would be a good transition to listen to a novel by someone who influenced her, and so whose writing influenced her writing, and see if I can see that. I'm also curious as I go through, more of the life and works of Jane Austen, if the teacher, Devaney Lucer, if she mentions Frances Burney. Maybe she already did and I just, don't remember. But anyway, so I'll be paying attention to see if she talks about that influence on Jane Austen. So that's it for this BookTube, this episode, and I'm gonna just keep plugging along on the books that I'm going slow in, and eventually I'll get finished with one or more, and then I'll get back to you. But thank you for watching, and happy reading.